Hello everyone, P from 41 here. So today I want to talk about my Rapid River arcade game. So this is made by Namco. This one was built in 1998, and what it is a rafting simulator. So you sit on this platform here, and it has a set of mechanical paddles which you use to control it. You can play one or two people at a time. And the cool thing is that this whole platform is on airbags and actually moves in conjunction with what's happening on the screen. Now, this is one of my most popular arcade games, and the craziest part about it is I got this game for free. So it was at the end of the day, I was just browsing through Craigslist like I usually do, and I stumbled across this game. It was listed for free in an area about 2 hours away as non-working. So I called the guy up and I asked him what was up with it. He said they had moved into a new house and this game was just sitting in their front room. They didn't want it, they didn't know what to do with it, so they were just giving it away. He said that they plugged it in, tried to play it. He said it moved, it seemed to be playing, but there was nothing on the screen. Now, I had done some reading about these. I knew that there was a compressor and valves and airbags and a bunch of cool stuff in there that I could use for something. So I figured worst case scenario, even if it's not worth fixing, I have a whole bunch of parts I can use. So I asked him if he was going to be around the next day. He said he was, but that he had somebody who wanted to come around lunchtime. There was no way I was going to make it by lunchtime, but I really wanted it. So I said, well, what if I come tonight? He said, yep, I'll be here all night. Doesn't matter how late, come on by. So I didn't leave my house until 8 o'clock at night. This was about 2 hours away normally. So I left at 8 o'clock at night. I got there around 10 or 11 o'clock. It was nasty, it was rainy. Something else worth mentioning is that due to an incident, one of my headlight housings on my truck was cracked and the bulb was broken. And the other headlight was badly oxidized. So I had one really poor headlight driving at night in the rain to go pick up this arcade game, which was not something I would recommend, and it was not pleasant at all, but you know, I did it. So anyway, I get there around 10, 11 o'clock. And this thing's sitting in his front room. I look a bit and then I decide, yes, I definitely want it. Of course I did. I had just driven 2 hours to get it. Now the problem was we didn't know how they had gotten it into the house because he moved in and it was just sitting there. So we ended up having to disassemble a whole bunch of stuff, take the paddles off. We even took his front door off the hinges to get this thing to fit out the front door. And keep in mind, it's raining now. So I'm trying to keep this thing tarped up. I get it towed onto the trailer. I finally get it all loaded up, tarped up the best I can, ready to leave. I left at probably around 1 a.m. Now keep in mind, it's still rainy and nasty. I got one headlight. I ended up getting some food from McDonald's, which I'm not a fan of, but whatever, I needed food. And I was dog tired and just trying to stay awake, but I made the drive back home. I didn't get back until 3:25 a.m. So I didn't have space for this at my house, so I just brought it here. I just shoved it in the back hallway, and I told my boss, hey, there's stuff in the back hallway. I'll take care of it later, and she was cool with it. So the first thing I did when I started working on it is I started trying to figure out why there was nothing on the screen. And this uses a projection screen TV, and it turns out that the compressor was not mounted to anything and had moved around and knocked the plug for the TV loose. So I plugged it in and the TV came on and it went through a whole bunch of checks and it was pretty much good to go. So I was like, well, guess we're gonna fix it. Now, even though the monitor was working, this game still needed a ton of work to get it in shape. Now, first thing I had to deal with was the main cabinet. Now, it seems that it got wet at some point at the bottom because the cabinet sides are swelled up a bit at the bottom, and the main floor of the cabinet was actually so badly warped that the entire cabinet was sitting too low to properly bolt up to the platform that you sit on. So what I ended up doing is I just took all that wood from the floor out and I replaced it with a brand new piece of wood. And then I braced everything up with 2x4s, which was probably overkill, but I went all the way up the sides so I could be sure that I was never going to have a problem with that again. The next thing was the paddle mechanism. Now, when I took it apart, it became very apparent that there was a lot of problems with the paddle mechanism. The grease had all dried out. One of the main components was actually just loose and flopping around in there, and the loose parts had actually been causing damage to the main framework of the paddle mechanism. In addition to that, the rubber feet that mount the paddle mechanism to the rest of the game were actually all broken. And in fact, somebody had jammed a block of wood in there and screwed it in from the outside to keep that mechanism in place since the rubber feet was broken. I don't know why somebody would be possessed to do that rather than spending the $10 for new rubber feet, but they did, and now I have some nice holes in the outside of the framework as a result. I also needed to get new boots or new bellows. Trying to find parts for these games isn't the easiest in the world, so what I ended up doing is I just got some cheap shifter boots from eBay and modified those to fit, which worked out pretty well. They aren't, you know, the nicest or the most durable in the world, but they work. I also went ahead and painted the paddles because they were looking a bit worn at the time. They probably need to be touched up again at this point, if I'm honest. After that, the next thing I needed to do was get a seat for it. This thing was just completely missing the seat when I got it. Now, from the factory, they have a molded plastic seat that looks like a raft. It says Namco on it. Unfortunately, these games aren't all that common, so I managed to find like one of them on eBay, and it was several states away, and it was several $100s, so that just wasn't going to work. I thought that maybe I could make a seat that would look pretty close to what it was supposed to look like, but that didn't work out either. So I went to the junkyard in search of a suitable seat, and what I ended up getting was this bus seat. Now, it's got some wear on it at this point, but when I got it, it was in very good condition. Now, the thing about bus seats is that a lot of them only have legs on the aisle side of the seat. The other side is usually mounted to the outside, to the side of the bus. So I got this seat, and then I also got the legs from a seat on the other side of the bus. I then took those home, and I was able to graft them together to create this seat, which has 4 legs. After that, it was a simple matter of building some brackets and bolting them down to the platform. So after all that work, I brought it all back here, bolted all the pieces together, and got it into place. Everything seemed to be working fine, so I went home for the night. Next day, about an hour after opening, I get a call. Apparently, the only thing on the screen was a couple of rainbow squigglies. But by the time I showed up, there was nothing on the screen. Now, what had happened is actually a pretty common issue with rear projection TVs. The coolant had leaked out of the CRT tubes inside it, spilled onto the circuit board, corroded it, and killed it. So the TV was completely dead. But I kind of lucked out, and somebody posted a free working rear projection TV on Craigslist, so I went and I got that. Unfortunately, it was a widescreen newer model, and this is an older 4x3 model. Luckily, I was able to make it work. I combined the two and created kind of this Franken TV, which actually works quite well. I do have another video where I go into a lot more detail on that. The only issue after that was that it would not turn on automatically. It didn't remember its last power state like the original TV did. So I created a standalone circuit that would turn on the TV automatically when the game came on, and again, I have a separate video where I go into a lot more detail on that. I haven't really done much to this game since then. I put some new T-moldings on and did a few very small things, but it hasn't really had any issues. It's been very reliable, and this game does get played a lot. The kids really seem to like it, and their parents seem to like it as well. So I've been very happy with the way this game has turned out. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little brief history on my free Craigslist arcade game. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below.